Hi, guys. Welcome back to another episode. Way to keep pushing through all these. We're going to start with the next artist. So, where we left off was Donatello, and I believe this is the last of our Ninja Turtles we're going to be talking about. And Donatello was one of the most important sculptors to help bring back or resuscitate classical sculpture from its tomb in antiquity. Um, he broke ground by introducing new aesthetics in line with the time's flourishing move towards Renaissance humanism. So it really left behind the medieval scholarly things and went towards a deep immersion into the humanities. He made art that no longer focused solely on religion, but kind of explored man's place in the natural world. He made lifelike and really emotional works that would make him one of the most influential artists in the 15th century Italy. He lived from 1386 to 1466, so this was pretty early in the Renaissance. So, first one we're going to look at is Donatello's sculpture of David. And if you remember Michelangelo's sculpture of David from the last video, you'll notice that this one is very, very different. In this one, I think that David looks more like a child and looks more like a man in the other one. And again, here we're seeing him standing on Goliath's head. So his head has been removed from his body, and this is obviously at the victory section after he's victorious. This is a bronze statue rather than marble, and it's located at the Museo Nazionale in Florence. And this is probably Donatello's most recognizable and celebrated work. It is a biblical story, obviously, of David bringing down Goliath. And David's triumph, made possible with God's help, symbolizes good conquering evil. The first mention of the statue was that it was located in the courtyard of the Medici Palace in 1469. And most scholars agree that the sculpture was probably commissioned by Cosimo de' Medici, who we talked about. Later, scholars discovered that the statue was once accompanied by an inscription that said, "The victor is whoever defends the fatherland. God crushes the wrath of an enormous foe. Behold, a boy overcomes a great tyrant. Conquer, O citizens." The next sculpture we're going to talk about is Penitent Magdalene. So this is a sculpture that's actually made out of wood, and Donatello made it of Mary Magdalene, and this is in pretty stark contrast to other depictions of her, where she's showed as a beautiful young woman in perfect health. Mary Magdalene is said to have spent 30 years in the desert repenting for her sins. And that's what Donatello is representing in this, is her after she's been traveling around in the desert repenting for her sins. He ignored the Western legends that say she was fed by angels in the desert. But, it was really revered for its realism and details. And it's probably his best masterpiece in wood. Here's another one of his sculptures, which is the equestrian statue of Gattameleta. This was done in 1453. Erasimo of Narni, also known as Gattameleta, which is the honeyed cat, was one of the most famous condottieri or military leaders in Venice. So after his death in 1443, his family commissioned Donatello to create a statue of him. And this was really very different from a lot of the equestrian statues. So an equestrian statue is a statue of a person on a horse, and really went back to some of the antiquity, so like the ancient Greek and ancient Roman examples of equestrian statues. The facial expression of Gattameleta is dominant and determined, and he and his powerful horse are ready for action here. All right, next we're going to talk about Botticelli, who lived from about 1445 to 1510. His full name was Alessandro di Mariano Filippi, but everyone knew him as Botticelli. And he was one of the most representative artists of Florentine culture. He had a unique ability to translate his ideas into images at the will of Lorenzo de' Medici. So Lorenzo de' Medici was Cosimo's brother, and he was a ruler of the Florentine Republic and a very, very enthusiastic supporter of the arts. So Botticelli's most famous work probably is The Birth of Venus, which he painted in 1486. I absolutely love this painting. It's beautiful. It is not a Christian work, but it is actually based on a Greek myth. So Venus was actually a Greek goddess. You can see the wind gods blowing her in on a seashell. And our dear Venus here came to symbolize the birth of beauty into the world. So here's another look at that. The next piece that we want to talk about with Botticelli is the Adoration of the Magi. So this is a Christian scene, and it's the scene where the Magi, or the three wise men, come to visit Mary just after she's given birth to Jesus Christ. Now, an interesting thing about this painting is that Botticelli actually drew some of the Medici family in here. So we have Cosimo de' Medici here in the front actually touching Jesus Christ. We have Lorenzo de' Medici over here in the corner, Piero Medici here, and Giovanni Medici is up here. And then Botticelli actually painted himself into this piece as well. The third one I want to talk to you about today is the La Primavera, which he painted in 1482. This one again has Venus here in the center. I think this is just an absolutely gorgeous painting. It's a group of mythological figures in a garden, and the garden's lush greenery is an allegory for growth brought on by the spring season. And the nature scene in this painting is so elaborate that there are hundreds of types of flowers and plants in here. I like the treatment of this translucent cloth. I think that's really beautiful. Next, I want to talk about Giotto, and then I'll end this video. Giotto di Bondone was kind of the forefather, one of the forefathers of the Renaissance. He was actually born in 1266 or 1267, maybe 1276. There's not super accurate records of his birth, but we do know that he died on January 8th in 1337 in Florence. And he was maybe the most important Italian painter of the 14th century, like very, very early on. So his paintings were said to have really started the interest in the Renaissance style, and he inspired a bunch of the later painters that we see. So he's been revered as the father of European painting and one of the first great Italian masters. So here's the first of his works in 1305. So remember, the height of the Renaissance is like the 1500s. So this is very, very early. This is called Lamentation, and it's Lamentation of the Death of Christ is the whole name of it, but most people just call it the Lamentation. And it's a fresco that's painted on the Arena Chapel in Padua. And this is the moment where they take Jesus down from the cross, and all of his disciples are around him, mourning his death. He favored a groundbreaking style of naturalism, which kind of was in contrast to the common flat two-dimensional conventions of medieval painting. We also have this one, which is The Last Judgment. Again, you can see that this is painted on a wall of a cathedral. You can see some of the architecture in here of the arches, and you can see the windows in here. So those aren't actually painted on a canvas. Those are part of the architecture, and the painting is around it. So this is the Last Judgment. And it's dominated by Christ, who's here at the center. And then he's got his 12 apostles to the left and the right of him. And then the two levels divide. And this is the Last Judgment of basically who gets to go to heaven and who gets to go to hell. So that's what this story was telling. And this one was done in 1302 to 1305. So again, very, very early. The last piece of Giotto's that I want to talk about is the bell tower for Florence Cathedral, or the Cathedral de Santa Maria del Fiore, that I showed you a while ago with the big dome. So this is the bell tower, and this was actually his original drawing for this bell tower that you can see pictured right here. And this is what it looks like today. And he actually didn't live long enough. So he did the original drawing, and then he died before it was completed. So the drawing was started in 1334. He died in 1337. So he was there for the first 3 years of work on it, but it wasn't completed until 1359. So it was about 20 years after his death that it was actually finished. It was finished by Andrea Pisano and by Francesco Talenti. So it looks pretty similar to the original sketch, but they did end up making it flat on top and not pointed, and they added more windows. But there again is his original sketch, and then many years later, the finished version.